Good evening. Welcome to December 4th meeting of Troy City Council. I'm Marty Baker, President of Council. Please silence your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. We'll begin with the invocation by Mr. John Schweizer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we assemble here tonight by your grace and under the flag of freedom. Give us the wisdom to realize what you have given us and the strength to protect it. Bless those who serve overseas, who are away from their loved ones this holiday season, keeping the flame of freedom lit for us all. We also ask that you protect those that make our streets safe and who respond when needed. Lastly, a Christmas wish. Let America be united again, one nation under God, with true liberty and equal justice for all. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee. Here. Mr. Terwilliger.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Heath.
Here.
Mrs. Oda.
Here.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
Mr. Kendall.
Here.
Mr. Swayzer.
Here.
Mr. Tremblay.
Here.
All members of council are present.
Tonight we have a presentation from the Troy Senior Citizens Center, and the Executive Director, Tamara Baynard Ganger, is here with us tonight.
Got a little bit of intro there. Good evening. I apologize for that. When we stood for the invocation, I was going to silence my cell phone. I'm sorry. As I bet you all probably thought we forgot you, but we didn't. We've kind of made a tradition out of bringing cookies to like the police and the fire and the city council, and we just appreciate so much everything you do, your support, and I hope you enjoy them. I will give them to Sue, and please make sure you all take one of these home with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and we also appreciate all you do for the community.
Thank you.
Mrs. Knight, please read a summary of the minutes of the November 20th meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of council, November 20, 2017. Public hearings were held on ordinances 027 and 028-17. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing a second 100-day moratorium on the issuance of certain permits on properties in the North Market Street area. Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing the rezoning of 25 parcels on West Main Street as recommended by the Troy Planning Commission, and further recommended that the legislation be an emergency measure. Finance Committee recommended that the appropriation ordinance be approved, which is the adoption of the budget, including funding to Troy Development Council, Troy Main Street, and Troy Recreation Association. Resolution number R50, 2017, adopt the complete streets policy, was given third reading and adopted. Resolution number R52, 2017, funding to Troy Main Street for 2018, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R53, 2017, funding to the Troy Recreation Association, was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R54, 2017, funding for Troy Development Council, was given first reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 027, 2017, a rezoning, was given second reading. Ordinance number 028, 2017, a rezoning, was given second reading. Ordinance number 029, 2017, a rezoning of 25 parcels, was given first reading. Ordinance number 030, 2017, appropriating funds for 2018, which is the budget adoption, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 031, 2017, moratorium on issuance of certain occupancy and zoning permits for areas of North Market Street, first reading and adopted. Following various comments, council adjourned at 7:41 p.m.
Are there any additions or corrections from council?
Move we accept the minutes as read.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Twist To accept the minutes, Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
We will begin committee reports tonight with the Law and Ordinance Committee and Chairman, Mr. John Schweizer.
Yes, ma'am, we have 3 reports tonight. The first is a liquor license notice. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the transfer from safekeeping to 111 West Water LLC, DBA The Brewery at 111 Water Street. The existing D5 liquor permit for that location. A D5 permit is for spirituous liquor for on-premise consumption only, beer and wine for on-premise or off-premise in original sealed containers until 2:30 a.m. The police department has advised that there is no basis for objection to the application.
Thank you. You may continue.
Yes, ma'am. This committee met on November 28th, 2017 to review the recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that parcel number C06-028005 be rezoned from the county zoning of R-1 AAA Single Family Residential District to city zoning of R3 Single Family Residential District. This is the address of 2436 McKeag Road, which was recently annexed. The proposed zoning will establish a city zoning for the property. At the November 20 public hearing, no comments were made regarding the proposed zoning or rezoning. It is the recommendation of this committee that ordinance number 028-2017 be adopted to provide for the zoning or the rezoning of parcel C06-082005 from R-1 AAA Single Family Residential to R3 Single Family Residential District. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Phillips, Ms. Snee, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council? You may continue.
This committee met on November 28th, 2017 to review the recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that 3 parcels located at 322 West Market Street be rezoned to B1 Local Retail District. It was noted that the future development of the parcels would be addressed through the development process with a thorough review by city staff, but that the matter now before council is if the B1 zoning is actually the most appropriate zoning for these parcels. It is a recommendation of this committee that ordinance number 027-2017 be adopted to provide for the rezoning of parcels D08-015370 in lot 1304 and D08-015360 in lot 1303 from M2 Light Industrial District to B1 Local Retail District, and parcel D08-15350 in lot 1302 from R5 Single Family Residential District to B1 Local Retail District. This is respectfully submitted by Mr. Phillips, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council?
I thought Lime Sludge Lagoon was bad.
Thank you. Our next reports are from the Personnel Committee and Chairman, Mr. John Terwilliger.
Thank you, Madam President. Committee members Terwilliger and Kendall met on November 28th regarding adjusting the entry-level wage rates for part-time and seasonal workers to $8.30 per hour to be consistent with the new Ohio minimum wage law for 2018. This is an increase of 15 cents per hour. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared amending the rate for seasonal employees, temporary laborers, and temporary clerks to reflect a starting hourly wage of all new hires of $8.30 for 2018 to comply with the Ohio minimum wage as required.
And that was, who's on your committee? That was submitted by?
That is submitted by Mr. Kendall, Mr. Twist, and myself as chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Terwilliger. The next report is from the Safety and Health Committee, and Chairperson Mrs. Robin Oda.
Thank you, Madam President. This committee met on November 28th to consider the renewal of the agreements with Concord and Staunton Townships for fire and EMS services and renewal of the agreement with Lost Creek Township for EMS services to a portion of the township. The current agreements expire on December 31st. The terms of the proposed agreements assure that the city is not subsidizing the services received by the townships. The UVMC campus will not be covered for fire and EMS services as part of the Concord Township agreement as of the second half of 2018. The annual payments are shown for each township in the charts at the end of this detailed report. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared based on the amounts shown in the charts below. Number 1, authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Concord Township for the City of Troy providing fire and EMS services for years 2018 through 2022. Number 2, authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Staunton Township for the City of Troy providing fire and EMS services for years 2018 through 2022. And number 3, authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Lost Creek Township for the City of Troy providing EMS service to an area of the township for years 2018 through 2022. In that current agreements expire at the end of the year, we support emergency legislation so that there is no interruption of services to the townships. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Twilliger, Mr. Heath, and myself as chair.
There would be a
would you like
correction.
to
Yes.
make a correction to that?
So
Mr.
in the
Titterington?
first paragraph of the report that Mrs. Oda just read, the UVMC campus will not be covered for EMS services as part of the agreement as of the second half of 2018. They will continue to be covered for fire. That was not corrected from the committee meeting.
Right, okay. Are there any other questions from council then? Thank you. At this time, does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments related to any of the agenda items this evening? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address. There is a 2-minute time limit at this point in the meeting, and Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper. Seeing none, then we'll move on to resolutions and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R55, 2017.
Resolution number R55, 2017, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Concord Township Board of Trustees and declaring an emergency. This is a 5-year agreement. First reading.
Are there any comments or questions from council?
Move for suspension.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Heath to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R56, 2017.
Resolution number R56, 2017, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Staunton Township Board of Trustees and declaring an emergency. This also is for a 5-year agreement starting January 1, 2018. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move to adopt or suspend.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Oda and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, or Miss, Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R57, 2017.
Resolution number R57, 2017, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with the Lost Creek Township Board of Trustees and declaring an emergency. This is a 5-year agreement commencing January 1, 2018. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Heath to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Twist to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Move on to ordinances and ask Mrs. Knight to please read ordinance O27, 2017.
Ordinance number O27, 2017. Ordinance changing the zoning of parcels D08, 015370 in lot 1304 and D08, 015360 in lot 1303 from M2 Light Industrial District to B1 Local Retail District and parcel D08, 015350 in lot 1302 from R5 Single Family Residential District to B1 Local Retail District. This is the location of 322 West Market Street. This has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission, and this is the third reading.
Are there any comments or questions from council?
Move to adopt.
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mrs. Snee to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance O28, 2017.
Ordinance number O28, 2017. Ordinance changing the zoning of parcel C06, 082-005 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the county zoning of R1 AAA, Single Family Residential District, to the city zoning of R3, Single Family Residential District. This is the address of 2436 McCaig Road. This will apply a city zoning to a recently annexed parcel, has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. Third reading.
Are there any questions or comments from council?
Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance O29, 2017.
Ordinance number O29, 2017. Ordinance changing the zoning of 25 parcels in the city of Troy, Ohio, along West Main Street from OC1 Office Commercial District to a planned development, PD, and declaring an emergency. This has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. This is the second reading. There will be a public hearing at the next meeting.
And this will go then to a third reading. Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance O32, 2017.
Ordinance O32, 2017. Ordinance repealing ordinance number 056, 2016, and establishing salaries of certain employees of the City of Troy, Ohio. This only impacts the entry-level salary for certain temporary and part-time employees to comply with the minimum wage. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
I move to suspend the rules on that.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Heath and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Twist to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 033, 2017.
Ordinance number 033, 2017. Ordinance amending ordinance number 057, 2016, appropriating funds necessary for the various departments and offices of the City of Troy, Ohio for the year 2017. This is the routine annual reappropriation of funds as provided by the auditor. First reading.
Are there any questions or comments from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
No, they're not.
Mayor Bubish, do you have any comments this evening?
Not tonight, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Titterington, any comments this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing this evening.
Mr. Kerber, do you have any comments this evening?
I don't, Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. City Auditor, Mr. Fergie, any comments?
Thank you, Madam President. I have nothing at this time.
Thank you. Are there any comments from council members this evening? Anyone? Any comments from city staff? Anyone in the audience have any comments or questions? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.